It was the kind of storm that washes cities clean, but on the manicured lawns of Blackwood Manor, it was a storm of betrayal that no amount of rain could ever purify. At 11:47 p.m., Isabella Reyes, 7 months pregnant and dressed in nothing but a silk nightgown, heard the click of a deadbolt behind her, the final metallic sound of her life shattering. Her husband, tech billionaire Graham Whitlock, had just thrown her out into the deluge. He called her a liability. He had no idea that by morning, the liability he cast aside would become the architect of his ruin. This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's a story of how a woman with nothing left to lose took on an empire and exposed a lie so vast it would bring the titans of industry to their knees. The Whitlock estate wasn't a home. It was a statement. Perched atop the highest hill in the exclusive enclave of Atherton, California, the mansion was a marvel of glass, steel, and stark white marble. It had more windows than walls designed to look out upon Silicon Valley, the kingdom its master, Graham Whitlock, had conquered. But from the inside, especially on a night like this, it felt less like a palace and more like a beautifully constructed cage. Graham Whitlock, at 34, was the boy wonder of the tech world. His company Aura Dynamics had revolutionized data security with its predictive AI oracle. He was brilliant-driven and possessed a charisma so potent it could bend reality to his will. He moved through the world with the serene confidence of a man who had never been told no. His wife, Isabella Reyes, was the heart to his cold logic. They had met in a Stanford coding class long before the billions and the magazine covers. She was a prodigy in her own right, an ethical hacker with an intuitive grasp of system architecture. In the early days, her insights had been the scaffolding upon which Graham built his empire. He was the face, the salesman, the visionary. She was the silent, brilliant architect working in the shadows. She had given up her own promising career to support his believing their partnership was a fortress. But fortresses can become prisons. The storm that night was biblical. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop a tiny fist pounding on the glass. Thunder rattled the minimalist furniture. Inside a different kind of storm was brewing one of chilling silence. Isabella, her hand resting protectively on the swell of her belly, where their son slept, watched Graham pace. He hadn't spoken a word to her in 3 hours, not since he'd returned from an emergency meeting at the office. His face, usually a mask of calm control, was pale and tight, his jaw clenched. The air was thick with a tension so sharp it felt like it could slice through steel. "Graham, please talk to me," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. "What happened? What's wrong?" He stopped his back to her and stared out at the thrashing cypress trees lining their driveway. "What's wrong?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "Is that everything we have built is on the verge of collapsing. And it's because of you." Isabella felt a cold dread seep into her bones, colder than the rain outside. "What are you talking about?" "Because of me." He turned, and the love she was used to seeing in his eyes was gone. In its place was something terrifying, a glacial empty void. In his hand, he held a thin black tablet. He tossed it onto the marble coffee table. It landed with a sharp clatter. "Our biggest competitor, Damian Blackwood of Cypher Corp, is launching a new security platform next month. Janus!" He spat the name like poison. "It's a carbon copy of our upcoming Oracle 2.0 prototype. The same predictive algorithms, the same counter-intrusion measures. It's a complete replica of a project that has been under the tightest digital security imaginable. A project, Isabella, that only 5 people on this planet have full clearance to. He took a step closer. Our head of R&D, our chief technology officer, me, our lead programmer, Genevieve Croft, and you. The implication hung in the air, suffocating her. Graham, no, you can't possibly think. Think what? He sneered, his voice rising. That my own wife, the woman I trusted with every secret, every line of code, would sell me out. We did a forensic audit. The breach originated from an external access point, an IP address that has been scrubbed 6 ways from Sunday. But the initial handshake, it traces back to a personal device that accessed the server 3 weeks ago, your personal tablet, Isabella, the one you use for your design sketches. He was lying, or he was being fed a lie. Isabella's mind raced. She hadn't accessed the Oracle 2.0 server in months. Her work had been conceptual early stage. That's impossible. I haven't... Stop lying! He roared, and the sound was so violent it made her flinch. Damien Blackwood must have offered you a fortune. Or was it something else? Did you want to see me fail? Were you always jealous? The accusation was so monstrous, so fundamentally alien to the reality of their life together that she couldn't even form a defense. It was like being accused of stopping the earth from spinning. Jealous Graham, everything I have ever done has been for you, for us. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. How can you even ask that? Look at me. I am carrying your son. Don't you dare use that child as a shield. He shot back, his face contorted with a rage she had never witnessed. That child is the only reason I haven't already called the authorities. The scandal would destroy the company. A pregnant wife betraying her husband. It's a story that would sink us. He walked to the grand foyer, his movements stiff and robotic. He pressed a button on the wall and the heavy, sound-proofed front door hissed open, revealing a wall of black, driving rain. "What are you doing?" she asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Minimizing the damage. You are a liability I can no longer afford," he said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. He walked back to her, and his next actions were swift and brutal. He picked up her purse from a side table, opened it, and removed her wallet and her keys. Then he took her phone from her hand. "Graham, no. Please." She begged, a primal fear taking hold. "You can't do this. It's pouring. I have nowhere to go." "That is no longer my concern," he said, his eyes as cold and hard as the marble beneath their feet. "You have betrayed this family and this company. Everything in this house, everything you own was paid for with Aura money. You will leave with nothing because you are nothing without me." He grabbed her by the arm. His grip was like iron. She tried to pull away, but he was too strong. He was her husband, the man who had whispered promises to her under starry skies, the man who had held her and wept with joy when they found out she was pregnant. Now he was a stranger, a monster dragging her towards the door. "Please, Graham, the baby," she cried, stumbling. "You should have thought of the baby before you committed treason," he said, his voice flat. He pushed her out of the doorway. The cold was a physical shock. The rain hit her bare arms and thin silk nightgown, instantly soaking her to the skin. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She turned back her hand on the doorframe, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. "I didn't do this," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I swear to you, Graham. I love you. Someone is framing me." For a fleeting moment, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Doubt, pain. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a wall of ice. He looked down at her, a drenched, pathetic figure, and his final words were the ones that would haunt her forever. "The evidence is absolute. Goodbye, Isabella." He pulled the heavy door shut. The click of the lock behind her was the sound of a universe ending. She stood there, shivering, for how long she didn't know. The rain plastered her nightgown to her skin, outlining the curve of her belly. The wind howled around the corners of the house, a mournful cry that echoed the one in her soul. She was barefoot on the cold, sharp gravel of the driveway. She had no phone, no money, no one to call. She looked up at the magnificent glass house, its lights glowing warm and golden. Her home, her life, her love. All gone, stolen from her in a matter of minutes by a lie. A lie so powerful it had turned her husband into a monster. Despair was a lead weight in her gut. She could lie down and let the storm take her. But then, a tiny defiant flutter from within her womb. A kick. A small, insistent reminder of the life that depended on her. Her son. The thought cut through the fog of shock and grief. This wasn't just about her anymore. She had to survive. For him. With a gasping sob, she turned her back on the glass cage and began to walk one barefoot step at a time down the long, winding driveway into the rain-swept darkness. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay. Her past was a locked door. Her future, a terrifying, empty void. And as she stumbled into the night, she had no idea that the seeds of Graham's perfectly crafted lie were about to blossom into a public spectacle beyond his wildest nightmares. The storm was just beginning. The mile-long driveway felt like a journey across a frozen continent. Each piece of gravel was a shard of glass against the soles of Isabella's feet. The rain was relentless, a physical weight trying to press her into the earth. By the time she reached the ornate iron gates of the estate, she was trembling uncontrollably, not just from cold, but from a grief so profound it felt like a terminal illness. The world outside the Whitlock bubble was a blur of headlights and slick black asphalt. She was invisible, a ghost haunting the edge of her own life. Sheer instinct, a primal need for shelter, propelled her forward. She remembered a small 24-hour cafe a few miles down the road, a place where she and Graham had once stopped for coffee, laughing in a life that now felt like a faded photograph of a stranger. It was an impossible distance to walk in her condition, but it was the only destination her shattered mind could conjure. She had made it less than a quarter of a mile when a pair of headlights slowed beside her. A beat-up older sedan, the kind you never saw in this neighborhood of Teslas and Bentleys. She tensed, ready to run, but her body had nothing left. The passenger window rolled down. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice was old, gravelly, and laced with concern. She looked over and saw a man in his late 70s with a kind, wrinkled face and a mess of white hair. He looked like someone's grandfather. "Please don't hurt me." She stammered the words, chattering through her teeth. The old man's eyes widened in alarm. "Good heavens, child, no. You're soaked to the bone, and, my God, you're pregnant. Get in. Get in before you catch your death." Hesitation warred with desperation, but the gentle kindness in his eyes was the first warmth she had felt in hours. Sobbing with a mixture of fear and relief, she stumbled to the passenger door and collapsed into the seat. The car smelled of old books and peppermint. "My name is Elias Vance," the man said, pulling a worn wool blanket from the back seat and wrapping it around her shivering shoulders. "What on earth happened to you? Where is your husband?" The word husband was a fresh stab to the heart. He threw me out," she whispered, the shame of it burning her cheeks. Elias's kind face hardened. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations. He simply nodded, his expression a mixture of pity and righteous anger. "Some men are fools. Some are monsters. Let's get you somewhere warm and safe first. We can figure out the rest later." He drove her not to a hospital or a police station, but to a small, cluttered bungalow nestled in a quiet part of Palo Alto. It was the antithesis of the Whitlock mansion, warm, lived in, and filled with books that were stacked on every available surface. Elias Vance, she would learn, was a retired professor of constitutional law from Stanford, a man who had spent his life championing the underdog. He made her a cup of sweet tea, found a warm sweatsuit for her to wear, and tended to the cuts on her feet with a gentle proficiency that spoke of a long-practiced paternal care. For the first time, Isabella allowed herself to break completely. The story poured out of her in a torrent of tears and ragged breaths. The accusation, the betrayal, Graham's cold, dead eyes. Elias listened without interruption, his gaze sharp and intelligent. When she was finished, he said, "This isn't just a domestic dispute, Isabella. This is a corporate execution. He didn't just throw you out. He strategically isolated you. No phone, no money, no credentials. He made you a non-person. The question is, why go to such theatrical, brutal lengths?" "He thinks I betrayed him," she cried. "He has evidence." "Evidence can be manufactured," Elias said calmly. "A man like Graham Whitlock, a man who controls a company built on manipulating data, knows this better than anyone. He's either the perpetrator of a masterful lie or the victim of one. Given his treatment of you, the mother of his child, it's hard to find much sympathy. But for your sake, we must assume he's the latter. A puppet for who his rival Damian Blackwood is the obvious beneficiary." Elias mused, steepling his fingers. "But this is too clean, too precise. The evidence pointing directly to your tablet. It feels personal, an inside job." He looked at her. "Who at Aura Dynamics dislikes you, Isabella? Or more importantly, who stands to gain the most with you out of the picture?" The name came to her lips instantly. Genevieve Croft. Genevieve was Graham's protégé, his chief technology officer. She was brilliant, ambitious, and ruthlessly efficient. She had always treated Isabella with a cool, professional disdain, a subtle condescension that Isabella had tried to ignore. Genevieve made no secret of her adoration for Graham, an almost worshipful devotion that often made Isabella uncomfortable. With Isabella gone, Genevieve would be the undisputed woman at Graham's side, his most trusted confidant. "She loves him," Isabella said, the realization dawning on her with sickening clarity. "She's always loved him." A classic motive. Elias nodded. Jealousy, ambition, and a rival CEO looking for a silver bullet. It's a powerful cocktail. Meanwhile, back at the glass cage, the sun was rising. But it brought no warmth, only a glaring, unwelcome light. Graham Whitlock stood by the window, a cup of coffee, untouched in his hand. He hadn't slept. The image of Isabella's face, stricken and terrified in the rain, was burned into his mind. A part of him, a small, screaming voice he was trying to crush, knew he had made a terrible mistake. But the evidence had been so perfect, so damning. Genevieve had presented it to him with tears in her eyes, professing her sorrow that Isabella, whom she admired so much, could do such a thing. The betrayal felt absolute. He had to act, for the company. His thoughts were shattered by the sound of his head of security buzzing his private line. "Mr. Whitlock, you need to see this." Graham switched the main monitor to the external security feeds. What he saw made his blood run cold. The gates of his estate were mobbed. A swarm of vans with news station logos, CNN, MSNBC local affiliates, was parked along the road. Reporters with microphones and cameras were crowded against the bars, their lenses pointed like sniper rifles at his house. How? How did they know? He hadn't told a soul except his security chief and Genevieve. This was supposed to be a contained internal matter. A public scandal was his worst nightmare. His phone rang. It was his PR director, frantic. "Graham, what the hell is going on?" "My phone is blowing up. There's a tip, an anonymous one, that you violently threw your pregnant wife out of the house in the middle of the night. Someone's pushing a story of spousal abuse." Graham felt the floor drop out from under him. This wasn't the narrative he was controlling. He was being cast as the villain. The story wasn't brilliant CEO foils corporate sabotage. It was monster billionaire abuses his pregnant wife. The sheer toxicity of it could poison aura dynamics for years. His investors would panic. The board would revolt. He hung up the phone, his mind reeling. Who would leak this? And frame it in this way Isabella wouldn't have. She had no phone, no resources, and it wasn't her style. She would never air their dirty laundry. This was an attack, a calculated, vicious public relations assassination. In Elias Vance's quiet bungalow, the television was on. Isabella watched her hand over her mouth as a live shot of her former home filled the screen. A reporter, a well-known media personality named Thea Collins, was speaking into the camera. Her face grim. The story is still developing, but sources claim that Isabella Reyes, the wife of Aura Dynamics CEO Graham Whitlock, was forcibly removed from their Atherton home late last night during the storm. What's most shocking are the allegations that Ms. Reyes, who is 7 months pregnant, was left without a phone or any means of help. We've reached out to Mr. Whitlock's camp for a comment, but have so far been met with a wall of silence. For a man so obsessed with public image, this silence is deafening, painting a very, very dark picture. Isabella felt a strange, dizzying sense of detachment. She was the woman they were talking about, yet she felt 1,000,000 miles away. "They didn't get this story from you, Elias," said, his eyes narrowed at the screen. "Which means the person who framed you is also the one who called the press." "Why?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling. "Why would they do that?" "Because this isn't just about getting you out of the way," Elias explained, his voice low and serious. "This is a two-pronged attack. First, they remove you, the one person who might have uncovered their plot. Second, they use your expulsion to publicly crucify your husband. They don't just want to steal his technology. They want to destroy him, his reputation and his company, all in one fell swoop. They've turned your personal tragedy into a weapon of corporate warfare." Isabella looked from the television screen where the image of her besieged home looked like a war zone to her own hands resting on the swell of her belly. The fear and grief were still there, a cold, hard knot in her chest. But now something else was stirring within her, a flicker of the old fire. The fire of the girl who could crack any code, solve any puzzle. They had taken her home. They had taken her husband's love. They had tried to take her dignity, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated her. They thought she was just a billionaire's pretty wife. They had forgotten that she was the architect, and she knew where all the secret passages were. "Graham is trapped," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "He's in the eye of a hurricane he thinks I created. He won't listen to me." "No, he won't." Elias agreed. "So I'm not going to talk to him," Isabella said, looking at Elias, her eyes suddenly clear and focused. "I'm going to find the proof. I built the foundation of that company's security. I know its flaws. I know its secrets. They think I'm out in the storm, broken. But they've just given me the one thing I never had inside that glass cage, freedom. And I'm going to use it to find the truth." The game had changed. It was no longer a domestic drama. It was a war. And Isabella Reyes, with nothing but a borrowed sweatsuit, a brilliant legal mind at her side, and a baby giving her the strength to fight, was about to step onto the battlefield. While the media circus laid siege to the Whitlock estate, Isabella found sanctuary in the quiet chaos of Elias Vance's study. It was a war room disguised as a retirement hobby, and for the next 48 hours it became her entire world. The old blanket Elias had given her was still draped over her shoulders, now less a source of warmth and more a security shroud. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Fueled by sweet tea and a burning righteous fury, she prepared to become a ghost in the machine she had helped build. "Graham is a creature of logic," she explained to Elias, who sat opposite her, taking meticulous notes on a yellow legal pad. "The evidence against me must have been flawless, irrefutable. A simple forged email wouldn't be enough. It had to be a deep-level fabrication, something that would survive a forensic audit. So where do we begin to look for a perfect lie?" Elias asked. "You don't look at the lie itself, you look at its shadow." Isabella said, her fingers itching for a keyboard. "Every action on a secure network leaves a trace, a footprint. Even erasing a footprint leaves a mark of its own. Genevieve is brilliant, but she's arrogant. She would focus on making the forgery perfect, but she might get sloppy with the cleanup. Or she might have left a back door for herself." Elias procured a powerful encrypted laptop, a relic from his days consulting on cybersecurity cases for the government. It was old clunky, but untraceable. Isabella's fingers flew across the keys, her muscle memory taking over. She wasn't hacking aura dynamics. She didn't need to. In the system's infancy, she had built in a series of emergency overrides, secure, non-commercial protocols designed for catastrophic system failure. They were her digital signature, hidden deep in the source code known only to her. Graham had forgotten they even existed. She slipped past Aura's formidable outer defenses, like a whisper entering the labyrinthine server architecture. "I'm in," she breathed, her eyes wide with concentration as lines of code scrolled rapidly down the black screen. "Now let's find that audit." Meanwhile, Graham was living in his own personal hell. The mansion felt smaller by the hour, the walls closing in. He was a prisoner of his own making, watching his life's work unravel on national television. His board of directors was in a panic. A crucial meeting was called. "This is a disaster, Graham," boomed a voice from the massive conference screen in his office. It was Marcus Thorne, his oldest investor, a ruthless man who cared for nothing but the bottom line. "Our stock has dipped 12% in 2 days, based on a rumor. Monster husband kicks pregnant wife to the curb is not a good look for a company built on trust and security. It's a calculated smear campaign, Marcus." Graham said, his voice strained. "Tied to a major security breach. We are handling it." Genevieve Croft, sitting beside him, projected an image of calm capability. "The breach was severe, but it has been contained. The leak to the press was an unfortunate emotional repercussion. We are preparing a statement to address the corporate espionage angle, which will contextualize the personal matters." Her use of personal matters was a masterclass in detached corporate speak, subtly validating Graham's actions while dismissing Isabella's entire existence. Graham felt a prickle of unease. Genevieve was almost too calm, too prepared. She had an answer for everything, a solution for every problem. When the crisis first broke, he had clung to her as a lifeline. Now her efficiency felt suffocating, her presence constant. She was always there with a fresh coffee, a legal brief, or a reassuring word, slowly, expertly inserting herself into the vacuum Isabella had left. The pressure was mounting from another front as well. Damien Blackwood, his chief rival, had called him. Not to gloat, but to offer sympathy. "Graham, my friend." "What a nightmare." Damien's smooth baritone voice purred over the phone. "To be betrayed like that by your own wife. Unthinkable. If there's anything I can do, any resources you need to weather this storm, just say the word. We're competitors, yes, but there's a code. This is beyond the pale." The gesture was so unexpectedly magnanimous that it immediately put Graham on edge. Damien Blackwood was a shark. Sharks don't offer sympathy. They smell blood and attack. This kindness was a strategic move. But for what purpose was he trying to get inside information? Or was this a gloat of the highest order, the victor pretending to console the vanquished? Back in the bungalow, Isabella found it. The forensic report on the security breach. As she read, her blood ran cold. It was a masterpiece of deception. The report showed a clear intrusion from her tablet's unique identifier, complete with fabricated logs of data packets being transferred to an untraceable offshore server. It was clean, concise, and utterly damning. "She's better than I thought," Isabella whispered, a grudging respect for her adversary mixing with her disgust. "Can you disprove it?" Elias asked, leaning in. "I can't disprove this," Isabella said, pointing at the main report. "It's a sealed narrative, but I can look at the data around it. The server maintenance logs, the access credentials, the temperature of the server room at the exact time of the supposed breach. People who build forgeries focus on the main event. They forget the ancillary data." For hours, she cross-referenced terabytes of mundane information. And then she found it. A tiny anomaly. A needle in a digital haystack. At 2:14 a.m. 3 weeks ago, the exact time of the alleged data transfer from her tablet, the system logs showed a Level 3 diagnostic was run on the primary server bay. This was a high-level command, something that would temporarily bypass certain security protocols for maintenance. It was a standard procedure. But the command hadn't been initiated by the automated system. It had been triggered manually. Her fingers flew. Who authorized the diagnostic? She pulled up the credential logs. The authorization code belonged to Genevieve Croft. Elias's eyes lit up. So she was active on the system at the time of the breach. "It's more than that," Isabella said, her heart pounding. "This diagnostic, it's a smokescreen. While it was running, it would have allowed someone with her level of clearance to impersonate another device on the local network. She could have made the system think the data transfer was coming from my tablet, while she was the one pushing the data from her own terminal. It was circumstantial. It proved Genevieve had the opportunity, but not that she had actually done it. It wasn't the smoking gun. It was the glint of light off the barrel in a dark room. We need more, Isabella. A jury would see this as a coincidence, Elias cautioned. I know. She leaned back, exhausted, rubbing her tired eyes. She felt the baby kick a steady, rhythmic thump. It grounded her. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She thought about Genevieve, her ambition, her meticulous nature, her obsession with Graham, and her relationship with the outside world. Had she worked alone? Or was Damien Blackwood more than just a sympathetic rival? Elias, she said suddenly. Forget Aura's servers. I've been looking in the wrong place. The proof won't be in Graham's company. It'll be in Damien's. Cypher Corp. Their security will be ironclad. Exactly. Isabella said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. And what's the one thing every fortress builder does? They admire their own walls. She opened a new window on the laptop. She didn't navigate to Cypher Corp's corporate site. Instead, she went to a niche forum for high-end data security developers, a place where the best of the best anonymously boasted about their successes. She began searching for posts related to Janus Damien's new platform. It was a long shot, a wild guess based on a psychological profile of her enemies. She scrolled through pages of technical jargon and arrogant posts, and then she saw it. A post from a user named Daedalus7, dated 2 weeks ago. The user was boasting about a new acquisition method, a social engineering-based hardware impersonation technique. The technical description was vague, but it perfectly matched the scenario she had just uncovered. It was a boast, a victory lap. Her blood turned to ice as she read the final line of the post. Daedalus7. The Icarus we were targeting never even saw the sun coming. He was too busy looking at his own reflection. Icarus, a figure from Greek mythology who flew too close to the sun. It was the private, condescending nickname that Damien Blackwood had used for Graham for years. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the user's avatar. A tiny pixelated image next to the name Daedalus7. It was a stylized graphic of a black rook, the chess piece. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She zoomed in her hands, shaking. 3 years ago, at a company retreat, Graham had gifted his top executives custom-made laptop skins. To Genevieve Croft, an avid chess player, he had given a sleek, minimalist design featuring a single black rook. It was her signature, her calling card. The post wasn't from Damien. It was from Genevieve. On a public forum, in her arrogance, she had confessed using a code name she thought was anonymous, with an avatar she thought was innocuous. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling with the magnitude of her discovery. "I've got her." The discovery of the Daedalus7 post was like a lightning strike in the dark room of the investigation. It was the missing link, the bridge between corporate espionage and personal betrayal. It implicated Genevieve not just in the theft, but in a conspiracy with Damien Blackwood. The Icarus comment was a direct taunt at Graham. The Black Rook avatar was Genevieve's signature left in a moment of hubris. "This is it," Elias Vance said, his voice grim with excitement as he stared at the screenshot Isabella had taken. "This is the weapon. But a weapon is only as good as the person wielding it. How do we use this? Isabella." A quiet word with Graham. A lawyer's letter. Isabella looked at the image of the Black Rook. It was a declaration of war. A quiet word wouldn't suffice. A legal battle would take months, years, buried in motions and countersuits, while the lie that had shattered her life remained the public truth. No, the betrayal had been public. The vindication needed to be public too. It needed to be swift, brutal, and undeniable. Graham's PR team scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. She said, her voice steely. His back is against the wall. He's going to go on live television and announce the corporate espionage story. He's going to paint himself as the victim and me as at best a tragic, misguided accomplice. He's going to try and control the narrative. And you're going to crash the party. Elias finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. I'm going to give the narrative back to the truth, she corrected him. We can't just leak this to a random blog. It needs to come from a trusted source at the exact moment it will have the most impact. Her mind immediately went to Thea Collins, the sharp, no-nonsense journalist from the cable news network, whose reporting had been the most balanced. Collins had focused on the facts, questioning Graham's silence, rather than simply sensationalizing Isabella's plight. She was a real journalist, not a gossip columnist. Through Elias's old university contacts, they found a private email address for Collins. Isabella drafted the message herself. It was concise and professional. Subject: evidence regarding the Aura Dynamics security breach. Ms. Collins. You have been reporting on the story surrounding me and my husband, Graham Whitlock. The official story you are about to hear at tomorrow's press conference is a fabrication. The truth is a conspiracy between Aura's CTO, Genevieve Croft, and Cipher Corp CEO Damian Blackwood to steal intellectual property and destroy my husband's company. Attached is a dossier containing irrefutable time-stamped evidence of this conspiracy, including internal server logs and a confession from the perpetrator on a public forum. I am giving this to you exclusively. All I ask is that you verify its authenticity, and that you break the story at 2:15 p.m. Pacific Time tomorrow. Not a minute before. Not a minute after. Isabella Reyes. She attached the encrypted file containing the screenshots, the log analysis, and a clear step-by-step explanation of the digital trail. They sent the email and then wiped the laptop clean. There was nothing left to do but wait and trust a stranger to light the fuse. The following day, the conference room at Aura Dynamics headquarters was a shark tank. Cameras were packed shoulder to shoulder. The air crackled with anticipation. Graham Whitlock, flanked by Genevieve Croft and a team of lawyers, walked to the podium. He looked haggard. The past few days had aged him a decade. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a moment he looked lost. He cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice amplified by the microphones. "I know there has been a great deal of speculation and, frankly, abhorrent rumor-mongering over the past few days. Today I am here to set the record straight." He launched into the carefully rehearsed narrative. He spoke of a sophisticated attack on his company, of a betrayal that cut to the very core of his life's work. He never mentioned Isabella by name, referring only to a compromised internal source and a deeply painful personal dimension. It was a masterful performance of a man trying to appear strong and in control while hinting at a broken heart. Genevieve watched him, her expression a perfect blend of professional concern and personal loyalty. She was the image of the steadfast second-in-command, the rock he could lean on in the storm. At exactly 2:15 p.m., as Graham was fielding a question about the financial impact, a low murmur started in the back of the room. A few reporters were looking down at their phones, their eyes widening. Thea Collins, standing near the front, received a message in her earpiece from her producer. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes locked onto Genevieve Croft. Another reporter's phone buzzed, then another. A ripple of notifications spread through the room like a virus. The low murmur grew into a loud buzz. Reporters were no longer looking at Graham. They were looking at Genevieve. A journalist from a major tech publication stood up, cutting off Graham mid-sentence. "Mr. Whitlock, we're getting a breaking news alert from CNN. It alleges that the security breach didn't come from an external source, but was an inside job orchestrated by your CTO, Ms. Genevieve Croft, in collusion with Damian Blackwood. Can you comment on this?" The question hit the room like a grenade. Graham froze his face, a mask of confusion. "That's absurd. Our forensic audit was conclusive. Where is this coming from?" Genevieve went rigid, her face draining of all color. Her eyes darted around the room, a cornered animal searching for an escape. Thea Collins raised her microphone. Her voice was calm and clear, cutting through the chaos. "Ms. Croft," she said, her gaze like a physical force. "My network has just published screenshots from a developer forum posted under the username Daedalus7. The user details a hardware impersonation attack identical to the one Aura claims to have suffered. The user's avatar is a black rook, identical to the custom design on your laptop. The user also refers to Graham Whitlock by the codename Icarus. Can you explain this?" Every camera in the room swiveled to face Genevieve. The clicking of shutters was like machine gun fire. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The poise, the confidence, the cool control, it all evaporated in an instant, revealing the terrified fraud underneath. Graham turned and looked at her. He looked at her ashen face, her panicked eyes, and then at the image of the black rook now displayed on a reporter's phone screen. He had seen that design 1,000 times. He had given it to her himself. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. The perfect evidence. Genevieve's constant presence, her over-the-top reassurances. Damian Blackwood's sympathetic phone call. It had all been a lie. A monstrous, intricate, devastating lie. He hadn't been betrayed by his wife. He had been manipulated and turned into a weapon against the one person who had always been loyal to him. And in his arrogance, in his blind trust of the wrong person, he had committed an unforgivable act. He saw Isabella's face in his mind, her tear-streaked cheeks, her pleas, her terror, as he pushed her out into the storm. And he felt a sickness so profound it threatened to bring him to his knees right there in front of the world. "Genevieve," he whispered, his voice cracking. She finally broke. A choked sob escaped her lips. She looked at Graham, her expression a twisted mess of adoration and desperation. "I did it for you, Graham," she cried, her voice a shrill, unraveling scream. "She didn't deserve you. She was holding you back. I could help you build an empire." The confession, raw and unhinged, hung in the stunned silence of the room. It was all the confirmation anyone needed. The story was no longer about a security breach. It was about a spurned lover, a corporate conspiracy, and a terrible, terrible injustice. Security guards moved in, gently but firmly escorting the hysterical Genevieve from the room. The lawyers were shouting. The reporters were in a frenzy. But Graham Whitlock didn't see or hear any of it. He stood alone at the podium, under the hot, unforgiving lights, the full weight of his colossal mistake crashing down upon him. He had protected his company, but destroyed his life. He had cast out his heart to save his kingdom, only to find he had handed the keys to his enemies and locked himself in the dungeon. He stumbled away from the podium, pushing past his frantic legal team. He had to find her. He had to find Isabella. But as he fled the chaos, he had helped create a terrifying thought struck him, even if he found her. How could she ever forgive him? The fallout from the press conference was apocalyptic. The live-streamed implosion of Genevieve Croft became the biggest story in the tech world and beyond. Auragate, the tabloids called it. Within hours, Cypher Corp's board of directors suspended Damian Blackwood pending an internal investigation, and his carefully constructed empire began to show deep structural cracks. Aura Dynamics' stock, after a brief, terrifying plunge, began a slow, painful recovery as the narrative shifted from a CEO's malfeasance to a company under attack. But for Graham Whitlock, the corporate victory was ashes in his mouth. The public humiliation was nothing compared to the private horror of his actions. He was the man who had thrown his pregnant wife out in the rain based on a lie fabricated by a jealous subordinate and a Machiavellian rival. The title of visionary had been replaced by fool. His first desperate instinct was to find Isabella, but she had vanished as completely as a ghost. She wasn't at her parents' house nor with any of their mutual friends. He hired a team of private investigators, the best in the country, but they found nothing. It was as if she had been erased from the world. In his desperation, a thought occurred to him. A memory of a name Isabella had mentioned with deep respect years ago. Her old law professor, Elias Vance. It took his investigators less than a day to find the small bungalow in Palo Alto. When Graham pulled up in his sleek black car, the house looked small and insignificant. Yet it felt more intimidating than any corporate boardroom. He walked up the stone path and knocked on the door, his heart hammering in his chest. The door was opened by Elias Vance himself. The old man looked at the billionaire on his doorstep with an expression of pure, undiluted contempt. "She is not a problem to be solved with your money, Mr. Whitlock." Elias said, his voice quiet, but as sharp as broken glass. "She is a human being you tried to break." "Please," Graham begged, his voice raw. The arrogance and control were gone, stripped away, leaving only a desperate, broken man. "I need to see her. I need to apologize." Elias studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Isabella," he called gently into the house. "You have a visitor. It is your decision." Isabella emerged from the study. She looked different. The fear and trauma were still faint shadows in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by a new strength, a quiet, unshakable self-possession. Her hand rested on her belly, not as a protective gesture, but as a statement of purpose. She was a mother, a survivor. The sight of her whole and strong was both a profound relief and a fresh torment for Graham. He had done his best to destroy her, yet here she was, unbroken. "Isabella," he began, taking a step forward. There are no words. Sorry is an insult. What I did, it was monstrous, inexcusable. I was blind, arrogant, and I believed a lie because it was easier than trusting my own heart. I let them turn me into a weapon against you, against our family." Tears streamed freely down his face. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn your forgiveness. Please, come home." He looked at her, his eyes pleading, expecting tears or anger, or perhaps even a glimmer of the love that had once defined them. Isabella was silent for a long moment, her gaze steady. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and clear, free of the hatred he deserved. "You talk about home, Graham," she said softly. But that glass house was never my home. It was yours. I was just a beautiful piece of art you kept in it. The person you threw out into the rain. She doesn't exist anymore. You destroyed her. And I am not going to mourn her because the woman who has been reborn from that storm is stronger than she ever was. She took a breath. You say you were blind, but you chose not to see. You say you were a weapon, but you chose to pull the trigger. The problem wasn't the lie, Graham. The problem was that you were capable of believing it. That deep down, you saw me not as your partner, but as a potential liability. That is a flaw not in my character, but in yours. She walked closer, stopping just out of his reach. I will not deny you your son, she said, and the words were both a gift and a judgment. You will be a part of his life. You will provide for him. You will have a chance to be a father. But you will not have a chance to be my husband again. You didn't just break my heart, Graham. You broke my trust. And a heart can heal, but trust once shattered, like that can never be perfectly whole again. The finality in her voice was absolute. He had come here for absolution, for a chance to rewind time and fix his catastrophic mistake. Instead, he was being given something far more painful, the consequences. He would be a father, but not a partner. He would have a son, but not a family. He would see his child, but always across a chasm of his own, making a gulf of irreparable damage. He nodded a single jerky movement, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He had lost. He had lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered, not to Damian Blackwood or Genevieve Croft, but to his own fatal flaws. Isabella watched him leave, her expression unreadable. She did not go back with him. She stayed in the warm, cluttered house, filled with books and kindness. She had her own plans now. A few weeks later, she quietly filed for divorce. The settlement was one of the largest in California history, but she took only a fraction of what she was offered, enough to start a new life and build a future for her son on her own terms. She used the money to create a foundation, one dedicated to providing legal and financial support for women in tech who had been pushed out, silenced, or had their work stolen by powerful men. She became an architect again, not of code, but of second chances. Graham Whitlock. The boy wonder of Silicon Valley continued to run his empire, but the light in his eyes was gone. He lived in his magnificent glass cage, surrounded by wealth and success, but he was utterly alone. He would forever be the man who had it all and threw it away in a single stormy night of unforgivable cruelty. He had won his corporate war, but in the quiet, lonely hours, he knew he was the one who had truly been defeated. In the end, this was not a story about a billionaire's rage, but about a woman's resilience. Isabella Reyes walked out of that storm with nothing, and in doing so, found everything: her strength, her purpose, and her freedom. She proved that the greatest empires are not built of glass and steel, but of integrity and truth. Graham Whitlock kept his kingdom, but lost his soul, a ghost rattling around in a house that would never again be a home. If this story of betrayal and triumph moved you, if you believe in the power of resilience to overcome even the darkest storms, then please let us know. Hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story of strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that uncover the stories hidden behind the headlines. Thank you for watching.